Good afternoon and welcome to the ninth episode of Catalyst for Change, organized by the Northern Virginia Economic Development Alliance. I'm John Jacobs. I'm your host for this series, for this session today. We have a wonderful discussion coming up, and one is particularly germane as we end the 2020 and move into 2022. And we look at some of the big changes that have occurred in workforce development and reskilling and the great need that exists there. I'll take us through one slide of bullet points that gives us sort of a common grounding so that we can have that as a common knowledge set. And then I'll introduce our panel. So let me go ahead and share my screen if you just bear with me. And we'll do that in less than an efficient manner, but in an earnest one. Okie dokie do. Okay, here we are. Catalyst for Change. This is our series, How Companies Turn Disruption into Success. Today's episode entitled Workforce Development and Reskilling, Releasing the Energy of America's Workers. Here are those slides. I'll just take us through quickly. Please read along. You're faster than I will be in reading them. Globally, 107 million workers will need to change their occupations by the year 2030. That's 12 million more people than before the pandemic. So that pandemic had a real accelerating impact on the need for change in the workplace. No less than 54% of all employees will require significant retraining or reskilling or upskilling by 2022. This is about 3 years ago from the World Economic Forum out of Geneva. 70% of workers report they don't have the proper mastery of skills needed for their jobs. Interestingly, 87% of executives would confirm that in a separate study, stating that their workforces are experiencing significant skills gaps. This from McKinsey earlier this year. Interestingly, as we move from, as the baby boom generation begins to retire, the millennials and Gen Zs are big fans of in-house development. 87% of millennials value in-house development and training as important to their career advancement. This next one is a bit shocking to me. And this from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. Companies with 100 to 500 employees hold only 12 minutes of in-house training on average per year, which seems quite the opportunity. That's from 2018. And this is from the Future of Jobs report from the World Economic Forum. Each October, they release this report. And this I thought was quite interesting. The relative importance of different skilled groups needed before 2025. And this is in ranked order. So first one's the most critical. And I'll just rattle them off. Critical thinking and analysis, problem solving, self-management. That's a completely new one, by the way. Self-management was not on that list last year. Neither was working with people on that list. It's now on that list from WEF, World Economic Forum. Core literacies, these are the technical and specific functions of your role. And then physical abilities. I do not know what physical abilities references. Try to figure that out, don't know. Before I go to the panel, let me just share this information slide with you so that, and these are the links to resources for education, for certification, for training. So I'll just rattle them off. Fast Forward Virginia, so fastforwardva.org is a great site for credentialing in many fields. And I listed a few here. And credentialing, as you know, in many, many areas is really critically important for careers. The Manassas Graduate Program, this is a wonderful program where one can secure their GED or high school equivalency diploma. And there's a great funding component. We'll hear from one of our panelists about that. And the similar site, particularly the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act program. This is for training and also for employers and services to them. And of course, one of our panelists is with the Manassas Department of Economic Development, City of Manassas, I should say. And so we'll get into that. And that's a great resource as well. I'm going to actually show our pictures here. So these are our panelists. We have the actual folks here. Amber Clayton, Director of the Knowledge Center at SHRM, the Society for HR Management. Nigel Payne, author and change leader out of the UK, although this morning poor Nigel is in Australia and it is quite early. Thank you for joining us there, Nigel. Patrick Small, Director of the Department of Economic Development with the City of Manassas in Virginia. I will now stop sharing my screen, and there we are. Hello, panelists. How are you?
We're good.
Awesome.
Good, John.
Nigel's probably rather sleepy, I suspect. Let me go ahead and just briefly tell folks a bit more about each of you, if I may. Nigel Payne, with over 25 years of experience in corporate learning, Nigel is a regular speaker, writer, and broadcaster on the topics of development, technology, and leadership. Between 2002 and 2006, Nigel led the BBC's learning and development operation. His company, nigelpayne.com, focuses on building great workplaces. He teaches with doctoral programs, has written leading books on learning, presents a monthly TV program entitled Learning Now TV, and shares a weekly podcast called From Scratch. His most recent book is entitled Workplace Learning: How to Build a Culture of Continuous Employee Development. Patrick Small is the Director of Economic Development, City of Manassas in Virginia. In this capacity, he is responsible for all aspects of business attraction, retention, expansion, and tourism. Prior to this, Patrick served as the Economic Development Director in the city of Portsmouth, Virginia, as well as in other roles across the state. During his career, he has assisted companies with investing more than $5 billion in new capital and with creating or saving more than 8,000 jobs. Amber Clayton. Amber oversees the Knowledge Center with the Society of Human Resources Management, which SHRM, Resource Management, which fields over 60,000 HR-related questions from members each year. Amber also co-hosts a podcast called Honest HR. She is SHRM certified and has been in various HR roles for over 20 years in retail and healthcare prior to joining SHRM. So that's our panel. I'm going to go ahead and start with Amber, if I may, and ask you sort of the broad question, which is, what's the state of workforce development and reskilling in the US today? And I know recently you had the SHRM annual conference. Was this discussed there?
Absolutely. And I had to check a little bit with your first slide because there's just so much data out there, and depending on your source, you're going to find some different information. However, the common theme is that the number of skills employers are looking for has actually risen dramatically, and they're struggling to keep up with the changing needs. They're not able to reskill their employees or upskill their employees fast enough for what their needs are. And so the skills gap has actually been a topic of conversation for a little while, but of course, post-pandemic, or we're still in the pandemic, it has become a bigger issue for employers. And we had one session that was specific to this topic, which was one by Jeremy Spake. It was called Rebuilding Work with the Power of Skills. However, with each of the ones that we had at our conference, which we have many sessions at our conference, there was discussion about the skills gap because it touches different areas. One of the things that we did, we conducted a survey earlier this year, and just to give some more data, to add on to your data, John, we found that 55% of HR professionals said that they anticipated that finding and recruiting talent with the skills that they need was going to be a significant challenge for them. There was a PricewaterhouseCoopers PwC survey in 2020 that showed that 32% of CEOs were concerned about the availability of key skills. And according to Monster.com, nearly a third of those employers agree that the skills gap has increased compared to a year ago. So it's definitely an issue right now that many employers are facing, and companies are doing things differently. And I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more about what companies and what employees are doing to try to bridge that skills gap.
Yes, I mean, we certainly will. Let me ask you, because you've just come off the conference, and you've got this other research. What are some of the high demand skills out there. And I know I read the World Economic Forum sort of more global skills, but are there specific technical skills that are seriously in demand in the coming years?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, there are several in-demand skills, and of course, depending on the type of position and industry that they're in, what we're seeing is that in-demand skills include things like advanced IT and programming skills. It could be technology design, mathematical skills, engineering skills, data analysis. Those are things that employers are looking for. Project management skills is another. The big thing though is the soft skills, and it's not something that comes out often, but you'll see that there are soft skills like communication and professionalism, empathy is a big one this year, especially in light of COVID with people having to deal with so many varying issues. The soft skills are what many employers are looking for the most, and those types of soft skills are not easily taught as it is with some of those technical ones that are in demand. But there are opportunities out there to build on soft skills.
Just to chime in real quick, John, that drives with a lot of what our employers tell us, which is in many cases, they're looking for people that are not necessarily trained, but are trainable. And it's those soft skills Amber references that many people lack in today's workforce.
Yeah, could I just jump in and say that I don't call them soft skills because they're not soft. I call them generative skills or power skills, because soft skills are the skills that build other skills. And so you're spot on, Patrick. So I think that's the reason why employers want them, because they're the building blocks for everything else. And we've neglected them for decades, and that is a problem. But I hope we don't continue to neglect them.
And Patrick, you're sitting there in the city of Manassas, and you interact with the business community every day. What's been their experience in trying to retain or attract employees in the last year or two?
So Manassas is fortunate in that we're in one of the most vibrant metro areas in the world, quite frankly. And Manassas itself has a stable of very good employers. We're a net importer of labor. So our employers are constantly adding new jobs, and we're bringing new employers in. But it's not necessarily the higher skill level, although things like cybersecurity, there are hundreds of thousands of jobs, nationally begging in those areas. But most of our employers are able to attract talent to this region for the higher wage, higher skilled jobs. It's the career and technical education positions that they lack. When you think of, for example, UVA Health and their Prince William Medical Center here in Manassas, over 60% of their staff do not require a 4-year or an advanced degree position. And that's everything from healthcare providers all the way down to the people that keep their physical plant running, which is, in a sense, a small city. So the people who run their systems, sort of the ones that support the frontline healthcare providers, and so many other employers, large employers specifically, are that way. But everybody from auto mechanics to the plumbers to the home building industry, those really good, well-paying jobs with advancement opportunity, career laddering, that we're having a hard time getting younger people to go into, or getting older people to consider, reskilling for.
And also your city is home to a number of major tech companies, either, and I believe when we were prepping for this discussion, you made the point that sure, they want technical skills, but they're not, and I think you again made it just now, it's not necessarily that they want a EE electrical engineering degree, or that they need that for a particular job. Is that the case? And what are some of those companies? Why don't you mention to the audience?
So Micron has its semiconductor manufacturing facility here, the only one in the Commonwealth of Virginia that produces semiconductors for the automotive industry. They're undergoing a $3 billion expansion even as we speak. BAE has their space division headquartered in Manassas. Lockheed Martin has their underseas division here. Boeing has a large division of their unmanned aerial systems team here in Manassas. Leidos is here, and a host of host of other employers. But similarly to the hospital, Micron currently employs over 1,600 people. They're going to be adding about 1,500 more. 60% of those employees do not require those advanced degrees. So when Micron's looking for a double E, they have the resources in the state's university system and in other places like the Rochester Institute of Technology, where they recruit these people who in many cases want to live in this metro area. But the technicians, as we talked in the chat, the people who are actually really doing the hands-on work in that plant. These are $10 million, $100 million pieces of equipment that manufacture these semiconductors. And it's not the double E's that are keeping them running in many cases, it's technicians. In fact, Micron frequently hires automotive technicians from the community college because those people have the skill set. They may not have gone to the automotive school thinking they were going to work for Micron, but they have no problem getting an offer from them. And if you want to advance and become a double E while you work for a company like that, those career advancement and education opportunities are there, but it's getting people interested in those jobs and getting them started that we struggle with.
Nigel, the part of the description of this webinar is about potential energy. And I was just having fun with kinetic and potential and energy. And that is meant as an analogy for what workers can do. And it's not just the, we'll call them the specific skill sets or the job functional skill sets, whether they're usually technical or certainly requiring that particular knowledge. What is it that is also holding workers back from reaching their potential?
I think that if I'm going to be honest with you, John, one of the key things is fear, that I think many workers are scared of admitting what they don't know. They're frightened of taking steps in different directions from where they feel secure. And they feel that they're not getting the support of their employer in making that journey. So I think if you can overcome fear, you're really moving in the right direction. The second thing is this: people, it sounds so obvious, but people don't know how to learn. They don't believe in themselves as learners, and they're invested in their status quo, not their potential. And that's where that's a great phrase, potential energy. I think people have got boundless, endless potential energy, but it's they keep it back themselves for those reasons that I've just mentioned. There's also a kind of lack of autonomy where people feel they can't make those decisions. They haven't got it in their grasp, that someone will tell them what to do and someone will sort it out. Unfortunately, there is no someone. The someone is you, and you've got to deal with that. And I suppose the final thing is this real ability of the workforce to see the next step in their life, in their career. So if you've got a sense of purpose and direction, then it's easier to step forward when it all just looks very, very bleak. And I think there are a lot of people sitting in work today in the US who are pretty terrified of what the future will bring, because they read all those statistics from Gartner and others, and they think, am I going to be washed up in 18 months or 2 years? And some of these people are young, in their 20s and 30s. But what I would say is, if you believe in yourself as a learner and you have that capacity to learn, you have a job for life, because the opportunities, as Patrick has just said, are boundless. But there's also a flip side of that. And that is people being discontented in the workplace. The Great Resignation that is dominant in the US more than any other country is a thing. It's not a kind of journalistic invention. 4 million people quit their jobs in the last few months in the US. Totally unprecedented. And that's to do with a sense of, I could do better. I am better. I'm frustrated. The way we've gone back after COVID is really disappointing. I don't feel I'm getting everything I should get out of my work. So it's that combination, people with massive potential energy on the one hand, and organizations not meeting that potential energy on the other. So you've got a push and a pull, and that is difficult. Organizations CEOs are in a very difficult situation. No wonder 32% of them are concerned about skills. It should be 100% of them, but 32% is a large, large number.
You make this point of push and the pull, which I think about, are they running away from something or running towards something? What's your thought on that?
I think it's both. I think they're running away from what they used to have before things changed during COVID, and they don't want to go back to it. So they're running away from, overt control, lack of autonomy, and I think a lack of purpose in the workplace. One of the things that COVID was horrible. We're not out of it, but COVID was horrible. The one thing it did in the workforce was just threw the mantle to workers. Said, get on with it. You work out how we meet our customers. You solve those logistics problems. So people took agency, and those organizations that allowed their workforce to take agency did far better, far faster than those where people sat back and said, right, okay, John, tell me what to do now. I've not got a clue. So that is what they're running away from. They want that back again, and they're losing it, or they sense they're losing it. And what they're running to is a different kind of lifestyle, a different kind of work-life balance, a different kind of basically a different kind of set of opportunities, perhaps places that give them the chance to move forward where they feel they haven't been appreciated, places they can use more of their skills, more of their interpersonal skills. That list on that item on your list, self-mastery. Self-mastery is a key skill in emotional intelligence. That is a classic soft skill or generative skill. People want that, as well as not enough have it, but those that do have it want it and want to keep it and want it enhanced in the work that they do. So that we're in this kind of churn at the moment. And it's not a bad situation. There's fantastic opportunities. But at the same time, there's a workforce trying to readjust to a new reality. And sometimes that is painful and it hurts. Other times it's scary and they need to do something about that, about overcoming that fear. And workplaces, work managers have to do something about overcoming that fear and insecurity.
And I was going to add, I agree with everything you said, Michael. I agree with that. I think it boils down to work culture. The flexibility is part of the work culture. And if you have a poor work culture, people are not going to want to go back to work for that organization. So, situations where what we're finding and what we're seeing is that employees who are able to work remote full time, they want to continue to work for remote full time. They're seeing the benefits of it. The employers are seeing that people can still be productive, and the employees are saving money on childcare, saving money on transportation, on parking. And so they're looking for that. If employers are asking them to come back into the workplace, some of them are saying, no, I want to go and work for a company that's going to allow me to work remote, and they're going to find it.
It's true. The other thing is that it's really been very, very big companies, household names that have announced to the workforce, okay, we're coming back on the 27th. And the workforce has said, oh, no, we're not. And every single one of them has climbed down. This is a different dynamic. That would never have happened 2 years ago. Never have happened 2 years ago. So yes, you've got to seize that moment and go with the workforce and rebuild. You don't have to say everybody has to be remote, but it's just people want increased flexibility, and that is increased agency. They want to do things their way, not necessarily the way that a manager tells them they have to do it, because they've experienced that and they enjoyed it.
It occurs to me the U.S. is known as having probably the most dynamic labor market in the world, and it's a nature of. I don't know of many other cultures that will, without blinking, load up a moving van and move across the country 3,000 miles, and do that 2 or 3 times during their careers. So I'm getting to a question here that is the U.S. unique in this way? And when we think about labor markets, and does that matter as much? And Amber, you mentioned about remote working. Does that matter as much, or does it matter more that heck, people want to live their lives? They perhaps we're getting out of this 20th century model of, pensions and, 30 years of employment. And finally, COVID, this pandemic, was the straw that broke the camel's back. And that suddenly they go launching over. So the question is twofold. One, is having a dynamic labor market matter anymore, or not? And I think I'm going to torture Amber. I'm going to torture you with that one first.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that it does matter. As I mentioned, remote work is important for employees right now, especially, after last year, and, assessing their lives and what they really want and doing something that is meaningful and satisfying for them. So I do think it matters for both employees and employers. Employers have to shift. They need to be more flexible. They need to look at the benefits of the organization and what's going to draw those high potential workers into their organizations. And even for employers, if you think about it, remote hiring in the past, the employers, they used to look at people around the area of wherever the work site was located, but now they might have this ability, if they're able to hire remote employees, they now have people across the United States that they could turn to. So they actually have a wider pool if they're willing to be flexible and allow people to work from home. It definitely matters.
Yeah, and Nigel, you come from the UK, and I'm just back on this point about the US labor market being malleable, highly malleable. Is that true in other regions of the world? And what are those experiences?
The US invented the dynamic labor market. That's absolutely clear. It was dynamic before virtually any other market around the world, but everyone's catching up. That one of the tragedies for the UK, in my opinion, leaving Europe means that we've exited one of the most dynamic labor markets in the world. And with that, literally millions of people talented, skilled people have left the UK and gone back to other European countries. And we're seeing the problems. You probably read that we're not getting fuel to the gas stations, and there's not enough food on it. It's because 900,000 truck drivers left and only 6,000 came back. You don't have to be a genius to work out there's a skills gap. So I think that the world is becoming much more dynamic, and it is becoming more global. That I know people in India who work for US companies or European companies quite successfully. Obviously, they're working remotely, and this is going to increase as the technologies get better. We work out how we do it more efficiently, and the pandemic gave a real boost to that. Things that weren't thought to be possible suddenly become possible. The fact that people don't have to travel all the time, constantly, just to do basic things like have meetings. I think that will have a definite knock-on. And the US, as always, has to watch its back. It might have the most dynamic labor market in the world, but it could lose that particularly to Europe, which is 26 countries with free labor movement between them. It's a massive potential workforce. So yes, US leads, but others are catching up.
Patrick, not all jobs are remote able, right? You can't change a car. You can't change fuel injection on a car 3,000 miles away. I don't think you can, but
can't drive it. Well, I was going to say you can't drive a truck remotely, but we're actually headed that way.
Yeah.
So you made the point about sort of technical or tradesman skills, essentially, right? And that is, which HVAC repair, automotive repair, et cetera. What's happening in Manassas that helps in jobs where you have to physically be present? What changes are occurring? What are employers looking at doing to retain those skills? Because losing a master mechanic for a garage is a tragedy for a garage, because that person is really well trained. What are some examples? Are you hearing about programs that folks are using to be more dynamic or more flexible?
Unfortunately, not really, and it's not just the mechanics and the trades. I mean, think about our public safety folks. They can't do their jobs remotely, and that's a huge chunk of, for example, the cities workforce, heavy equipment operators, sanitation drivers, truck drivers, all of these skills that really are what underpins our day-to-day lives and helps keep the country running. People are not going into those jobs. I don't think we as a country do a good job. This probably started in the 70s, perhaps, where we developed this notion that everybody goes to college. Now, granted, those are the folks that can work remotely, and that's right for a lot of people, but it's also not right for a lot of other people. And I think we're doing a disservice to a lot of people by not assessing their skills, the skills Nigel talked about and Amber talked about, but also their aptitudes. We don't do really aptitude skill testing for young people, and we don't make them aware of these other opportunities. And, working on a construction site as a, hod carrier for a brick masonry company, it's unglamorous to start, but you can start at 17 or 18. You can get good wages. If you're in a union state, you have the ability to go through apprenticeships. If you're in a non-union state, you have the ability to get training otherwise, and ultimately retire as a construction foreman. And some of those jobs do still have the pensions that Nigel referenced earlier. I know union jobs frequently offer pensions to this day, whether they're through the companies or through the union itself. So, I'm less concerned with those workers we've been talking about for the past 25 minutes and more concerned with how we support our economy and the companies that run it by helping them get these workers that they need to do sort of the mechanical portion of the job. I think, Nigel, you called it the other day, the people that do the work that helps us do our work. Really identify what those opportunities are that are out there. And our community colleges do a great job of upskilling folks. I mentioned career laddering more than once, but showing people what those ladders are and then helping them up the steps of the ladder. That's the employer's responsibility you started the question with. How do you identify those people within your organization, make those opportunities available to them, be a welcoming employer who ideally promotes from within when you can, and advances people. So, there's an employer responsibility, and I think that employer responsibility is not just to their workforce. I think it's societal. I think the employer has the business community, which is vilified on so many fronts, has a responsibility to interject themselves into the education system and make the education system start to sort of shift back. Maybe we don't go all the way back to where we were in the 70s, where half of the school got on a bus and went to the trade school, at lunchtime, and the other half, went on to calculus class or wherever they were going. But the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction.
You made that point as we prepped as well about bringing more presence of the companies within a high school environment and sort of bridging that divide. Amber, did I interrupt you? Sorry.
No, that's fine. Someone had mentioned earlier about employers no longer requiring degrees or diplomas for specific positions, and that is a trend that we are seeing. We are seeing that employers are lowering their qualifications and maybe increasing their experience, because we know that there are people in different generations who have had years of experience in something but may not hold a degree for whatever reason. And so, many employers are starting to look at that now and make adjustments in their requirements for the position. We also know, just from an acquisition standpoint, that there are, I would say, less than half of employers are actually doing things like they're increasing the employees' hourly rate. We know that the minimum wage is low currently. Some states, of course, have higher minimum wages, and they have stages where they're going to be hiring it even more. But there are employers out there right now that are trying to give higher rates of pay. They're trying to do signing bonuses. Some of the employers are looking at temporary hires that could potentially be permanent hires. And then, of course, there are employers who are doing the right thing by trying to upskill and reskill their employees. So there's a lot of different things that employers are trying to do to hire and retain those employees.
Just
I think that'd be.
please go ahead.
I was just going to make a quick point on what Amber said that stuck with me. 30 years ago when I first started my professional career, the woman I worked for, her husband did all the sound setup and stage setup for the city of Tallahassee, for all their parks and rec, for all their entertainment. And that position required an electrical engineering degree to fill.
Yeah, crazy. What I was going to say, John, is that I think employees have a responsibility, and the vast majority of employers recognize that or are stumbling towards recognizing that, because the truth is that people learn best when they can practice. People learn best in the workflow, doing the job. And one of the keys for skill development is skill coaching, that you have someone sitting next to you or a more expert worker sitting next to you. So we've got to kind of unlock the idea that you learn skills in a classroom and then you apply them somewhere else. The problem is that if you're not particularly motivated, or you're scared, or you feel that you don't know very much anyway, you never get from the classroom into the workplace. I think you need to start in the workplace and go back to the classroom. I think we've got it the wrong way around.
I don't know that it's unique to us, but I'll give you an example of our police officers. Initially, we would hire officers pending their going through the academy. The academy is offered at certain times a year. Well, recently, we started putting them on the payroll at a lesser salary, giving them administrative positions where they could work side by side with somebody, like Nigel said, until they could get in the academy. Because these employees weren't waiting around for 4 months for us to start a new cohort in the police academy.
Yeah, it's all true. And I think there's 1,000
getting better employees as a result.
Yeah. And people that you've had a chance to work with for a decent period of time to assess their potential. Yes, I think so. So it's basically employers taking risks. They've got to take a few more risks now to be able to meet the needs that they're facing. Not expect people perfectly formed, freshly baked, ready to go. They've got to say, we'll go halfway to meeting, bridging the gap between what you can do now and what we need you to do in the future. Yeah, like that police example. We need thousands of examples like that.
I'll just mention to the audience, just if I could, we are taking questions. I neglected to mention that at the top, but if you've been on this series before, you know we do take questions. The bottom of your your screen, if you nav down, there'll be a Q&A button. Feel free to put any questions or comments if you like there. Amber, please.
I was just going to say that employers are looking at internships, apprenticeships. Some employers may feel like they don't have the funding or the time available to do that, but in the long run, these can help not only the employees to achieve their career goals, but to help those employers build that talent pool to retain those highly skilled workers if they're the ones that are actually training them.
And to Amber's point, I have one employer that takes kids out of high school and trains them to do some of the bookkeeping and financial work, and then pays them, puts them on the payroll, pays their community college tuition to put these people through school. And the company said it saves them $30,000 a year. And these kids, in this case, are talented.
It's about building loyalty rather than just expecting it. I think that's really important. But big companies like Amazon and Starbucks have invested hugely in helping their employees get basic qualifications and skills. And Amazon was paying employees to take on service roles for Amazon, so because they had these massive gaps. So they not only did they train them and develop them to take those new roles, but they gave them contracts to ensure that they could do the job. They had income coming in as soon as they started. So there are lots and lots of great examples of innovation. What we haven't got is universal innovation, and that's the only way we're going to solve the kinds of problems that were outlined at the beginning, John. That's what we need. More companies to do more, be more imaginative, find new ways, because they're there and the people are there.
I find it interesting is, and I take the point that companies, employers need to be more insightful as to whom they're hiring or allowing into their workforce, and not just hiring the resume, right? Because the easiest thing for a hiring manager to do is say, here's my job requirements, here's this resume, how much do they match? Done. I've got my short list. And I don't know how successful that is, but at least this question, how do you quantify, if you're not hiring the resume, how do you quantify a good candidate, keeping in mind that World Economic Forum top criteria? Almost none of that is instantly quantifiable. Right?
John, before the other two answer the question, I was going to interject. It's the hiring manager is also at risk. If I turn down the candidate that has a master's degree and the other employment qualifications for that person that I intuitively think can do the job or get a good reference for, I potentially open myself up to a discrimination suit.
So I was going to say, I mean, of course, there are situations where there may be discrimination suits, but as far as the recruitment, employers need to, first look at their job descriptions and what it is that they're looking for, making sure that they're hiring for the right, start to post these jobs out there and start to contact candidates. Many of these employers are using the applicant tracking systems that use keywords in order to filter out some of those. And I caution employers in using those, completely, because there are individuals that are out there, untapped talent pools, like someone who's in the military, that maybe their military background doesn't translate necessarily to civilian background. And so, really having, looking deeper into that, not just the resumes and what's on there, but, having those conversations with those individuals where you can, you'll be able to assess some of those, what did you call them? Power skills, Nigel?
Power skill. I did.
Soft skills. Using behavioral interview questions, you can find out whether or not these individuals have the empathy and have good communication skills and have those skills that you need, the leadership and navigation. Think about it, military. There's a lot of individuals who have leadership skills in the military, but maybe they don't have that in the particular industry that you're looking for, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to qualify for the job that you have and be a great person for that position. So I think you've got to look deeper than just the resume and the keywords that are on there, because anybody can put, the keywords from the job description. You really need to take the time to reach out to individuals and to, have those conversations with them to find out, what they can bring to the table.
My slogan is hire for attitude, train for skills. And I think if you get someone who's the right fit for your organization, everything is possible. If you get someone with the right qualifications who is the wrong fit, you're going to have a nightmare all the way through their term with you. So organizations are getting better at looking at people who have the fit, not necessarily the credentials. And even companies like Google threw away the requirements for credentials to focus more heavily on getting the right people who will work with the teams and then putting them through intense development to get them up to the right level. It's much easier to develop someone's skills than it is to develop their personality. We all know that. And more organizations should realize that too.
Before we run out of time, I wanted to give a little highlight to the City of Manassas programs, particularly the Elevate Coalition. So my understanding, and Patrick, please fill in the blanks, that I guess was the end of last year or so, you took the interesting move, very creative, to take the CARES Act funding and then apply it to educational training, particularly, if I have this correct, is that for the GED program, or is that?
That was the Elevate program and the Graduate program are similar but separate. Graduate is the GED program.
Graduate's GED, and that's with SkillSource you partner, correct? And then
in both cases, we partnered with SkillSource.
Okay, tell us a bit about Elevate Coalition, the Elevate Coalition, would you?
So the federal money that came down to the states and localities, the CARES Act funding, came with strings, specific Treasury guidance and bullet points. And there wasn't a lot of wiggle room in the economic development section. They were basically driving us to make grants of all various sizes, stripes, and shapes to employers in our area. But under the, I guess, more social welfare sort of bullet points, were some language about being able to train or give employment skills to people who've been laid off as a result of COVID. And our unemployment went from a 2-decade low of 2.0% in December of 19, 2.5% in March of 2020, to 11.3% 1 month later in April. And we did not have boarded up businesses in downtown. We weren't having employers en masse calling us up and saying, you know, I've got to shutter my doors. But we had people out of work, and a lot of people out of work. And that was sort of a national phenomena as well. But we took those CARES Act money, and instead of shoveling it out the door to companies who in many cases could have used it, we focused on the employees that in the long term the companies would need. And we went after existing programs, existing credentials that could be easily and quickly achieved, and underwrote them and did a massive marketing campaign. We did this in partnership with Prince William County and the city of Manassas Park. So it was a tripartite, about to be award-winning program through the International Economic Development Council. Used SkillSource as a partner. Primary training provider was Northern Virginia Community College, although CDL courses and other CNA type programs were available to individuals as well. We allocated up to $5,000 per person, which more than covered the unsubsidized portions of these training, which in many cases are already heavily subsidized, and made them tuition free, made them expense free from a books and supplies perspective. But then we went so far as to say this money can also be used for transportation, to offset childcare, to purchase laptop, to buy a tool belt, to construction trades where you headed, and really trying to remove cost as a barrier to get folks back into the workforce, but to get them back into a workforce at a higher level than where they had started before they were out of the workforce. We have, you know, in Manassas, we were chatting the other day, it seems based on wages and household incomes and things of that nature, that we export lower wage labor and import a lot of higher wage labor. And we want to identify those individuals in our community that are in these lower wage positions and match them up with the employers that have these higher wage jobs. So, you know, one of our slogans became "Our kids get our jobs," and that was more for, you know, high school training and prepping them to go into these positions. But let's get those people that are already in our community and get them the skills that they need so they can work here at home, which has so many benefits society-wide. I mean, not the least of which is the congestion problems we deal with here in Northern Virginia.
So I actually have data on what you just mentioned about the cost, and from our research, we showed that 55% of unemployed U.S. workers said that costs were prohibitive, that, you know, cost was an obstacle to them reskilling and upskilling. So for your organization to be able to fund, you know, and allow for tuition-free education is great, because so many people who are unemployed or furloughed didn't feel like they could do that, and they didn't have an employer to reimburse or pay for it.
It's also the mental problem. You know, if you've been furloughed, you're scared, you're nervous, and to have someone reaching out to you is really important, rather than it's up to you, you sort it out yourself. So I would congratulate the city of Manassas. I think that's an incredible program, and replicate that well right across the country. You kind of solve the labor issues overnight, almost. So it's very, very important, that kind of initiative. It's a kind of public-private partnership as well. That's also quite interesting and dynamic.
Very much, because I mean, on the back end of the program, we were relying on the employers to first of all tell us what skills they needed and what kind of workers they were looking for, but then on the back end to hire them. And at the time, Novant Health, UVA Health Systems, which is now UVA Health here, agreed to interview every single person that we put through one of the medical trainings. So not guaranteed them a job, but guaranteed an interview for all our graduates, and we were able to market that as well.
The other program is your graduate program. Tell us about that. I love this story. I think it's so great. So tell the audience, would you?
So the city of Manassas has a high school graduation rate that lags the regional and the state average. It's about 83% of our population has a high school education or higher, so 17% does not. I think the regional average is either 87 or 89%. Again, one of the most educated regions, not just in the country, but in the world. So this is a number that's unacceptable to our community, and it's unacceptable to city council. And one of their strategic goals is to raise that rate to at least the regional average. Well, at first blush, you might assume that increasing that graduation rate means working more closely with your high schools to get people to graduate on time or to not drop out or to otherwise. And as we all know, public education is an expensive proposition for local and state government. So, you envision buckets of money going into, sort of this process that's going to matriculate over a decade or more as you start to shift this number. Well, sort of a light bulb went off, and I'll give the credit to our city manager, who's the one that just sort of mentioned it in passing to me. If people had a high school equivalency, that actually counts towards and affects the number. So, light bulb. Well, we all know there are programs out there to get your GED, whether you're 18 or 80 years old. What many people may not know is those programs are highly subsidized. In the case of Manassas, it's through the Prince William County Adult Education Services, through their public schools. Again, SkillSource as our partner. There is some cost of testing to the applicant. There is some minor cost of materials. But again, making this cost-free, we stepped in and said, we will pick up those additional costs. We will pay whatever gap exists, we'll pay for the supplies. And at graduation, we will give you a $250 universal gift certificate to merchants in the city of Manassas. So even offered a cash incentive on the backside of this. Mm-hmm. And our first few cohorts, we graduated, and through a graduation ceremony for them, the state Secretary of Education came. We invited the families. We fed them. We had a huge cake. We had commencement speeches. We bought them caps and gowns. There weren't very many dry eyes in the audience as you saw these people who, for whatever reason, disengaged from high school. And there's so many reasons, delinquency, pregnancy, frustration, home life. I don't care what the reason is. I want to help you get back in and get this. And if you're not doing it for a workforce development reason, if you're not doing it to advance your job or career, if you're Dave Thomas from Wendy's, who, never had a high school diploma and went back at the end of his highly successful career and got it as an example to his grandchildren, but also as a personal check on his bucket list. A lot of these people have regrets that they never finished this. So, if nothing else, if I can, help relieve a regret that you had. At the same time, I'm raising my high school graduation rate selfishly. But there's a lot, it's not all clinical. There's a lot of emotion in these programs as well.
Nigel.
You're building people's lives.
Please go ahead, Nigel.
I'm just saying that what you're giving people isn't a qualification. It's a belief in themselves and a force for the rest of their life. And that's really important. And employers have got to recognize that as well, that people are emotional individuals. If you can galvanize their emotion and self-belief, then a whole bunch of other things become much easier to achieve. I apologize, John, for interrupting.
No.
I just want to add the real expense to us in this program, as I mentioned, was not necessarily the cost of tuition, because that's paid for by the feds and the state, nor is it the $250 gift certificate. It's the advertising that we had to do to make people aware of this. Postcards to every home, social media advertising. I spent a factor of 10 more on advertising than I did on the actual programming to make people aware of this.
Does that go to Nigel's point about not believing in yourself? Not that, sure, I see it, it's being promoted to me, but that's not for me. I'm 45. I'm doing fine, my job, but that's not for me. So Nigel, how do people overcome that? How do you overcome the, oh, let it go kind of thing? Or I don't want to take that risk.
I think the key way of doing that is to create role models. You need champions. You need people who've done it that will stand up and say, people like me can do this. And often an individual will believe someone they think is like them rather than someone big and important like yourself, John. Now, that they will listen to what you say, but they won't necessarily do what you say. They listen to a role model, they see a role model and think, hey, that could be me. Hey, what's the difference between her and me? Nothing. I can do this. So I think you need to roll out the ambassadors and the champions. And out of that first graduate cohort, Patrick, I really hope that you take 2 or 3 of those people and make them into role models, ambassadors, and their message will sell this to others. So it's always about the possibilities to think, if they could do it, perhaps I could do it, rather than you should do that. It's the push and the pull. You've got to get people to pull themselves towards it, not push them. They've got to motivate themselves ultimately. Self-management, we're back to that phrase at the beginning. If people believe in their own ability to manage that in their lives and be in control and take their opportunities, then they've got a chance of moving forward. If not, they just sit there watching it thinking, maybe. And then when you get to maybe, you get to no very, very quickly rather than to yes. So it's getting people to yes.
I'll tell you, interestingly, and I hadn't mentioned this in our prep, we're having trouble not just enrolling people, but once they finish the coursework, we're having trouble getting them to go take the test. And it's that fear maybe that Nigel talked about earlier. And to Nigel's point about using role models, I don't know what the takeaways for the audience are going to be, hopefully good, but I had not considered using those role models. And that's my takeaway. And I intend to do that because I'm trying to do it through imagery on social media and these postcards, an older grandfather in a cap and gown with, a young 14 or 13-year-old granddaughter, but that's just, it's static in imagery. I think I have to do more, to Nigel's point, to make people feel like this is them, their opportunity.
I think that each of us has a story to tell. And I think each of us has a responsibility to do that when we, come across someone who has that fear.
Well, I want to thank the panel. I think we're running out of time here. I want to thank the audience for joining us today and thank this panel. This video will be up on the Nova EDA site, novaeda.org by tomorrow afternoon, perhaps Monday, depending on the breaks. But certainly I'll work on it right away. I want to thank everybody. It's been a wonderful discussion. I really enjoyed it. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
And John, thank you as host, and I really enjoyed meeting Amber and Nigel remotely. Thank you both as well.
Pleasure's mutual. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.